Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, hello and welcome to the closing plenary of the ITF Summit 2024. I'm Melinda Crane, and it is a great honor and pleasure to accompany you as moderator. As you know, the overarching theme of this year's summit has been greening transport, keeping focus in times of crisis. And here in this last plenary, we want to put the focus on cities and ask how we can all do better at planning, financing, and operating low-carbon, regionally integrated mobility systems that make our cities more resilient, more prosperous, and more equitable. As transport leaders, you're well aware, I know, that there are numerous innovative models out there for integrated and inclusive connectivity, from the 15-minute city in which most daily necessities are just a 15-minute walk, bike ride, or public transport ride away, to complete streets that are enabling safe and convenient travel by users of all ages and all abilities, no matter what transport mode they choose. Nonetheless, there is no one-size-fits-all, and urban planners and transport policymakers absolutely must respond to local needs, conditions, and challenges as they seek to transform existing systems. So a key aim of this session is to explore what principles and best practices they can keep in mind while looking for those solutions. What governance structures, policy, regulatory frameworks are proving effective in fostering urban and regional planning that is inclusive and safe, integrated and sustainable? What financing mechanisms deliver greatest leverage, and what measures work best to support and incentivize clean public transport, including informal modes, while discouraging the use of individual motorized vehicles? And what is the role and impact of technology and new mobility solutions in fostering economic growth and quality of life by enhancing connectivity both within urban areas and between cities and regions? We've gathered a group of leading experts and decision makers, planners, to share their insights, and I'll do just a very quick round of introduction, if I may, and ask all of you just to stand up very briefly while I do that. So starting over here, Burkhard Jung is the Lord Mayor of Leipzig. Would you mind just standing up, everybody, as I introduce you? For the past 18 years, he's a former theologian. I learned that for the first time. Or maybe you're still, maybe once a theologian, always a theologian. And he also heads the European network Eurocities. It's also a great pleasure to introduce Juan Carlos Muñoz. He is Chile's Minister of Transport and Telecommunications, also professor in the Department of Transportation and Logistics Engineering at the Pontifical Catholic University of Chile, and he will be, or is now, Summit President, starting as of yesterday evening. And heading over here, I'm very pleased to introduce Lake Sagaris. She's Associate Researcher with the Center for Sustainable Urban Development, CEDEUS, at the Pontifical Catholic University of Chile. And seated next to her is Mohamed Mezghani. He's serving his second term as Secretary General of the International Association of Public Transport, UITP. And then further down that side is Ángel Cárdenas Sosa. He is Chief Manager of Urban Development and Creative Economies at the development bank CAF, and he's overseeing a portfolio of some 7.5 billion euros in multiple urban sectors across 20 countries. And further along the panel is Shuai Ren. She is Head of Capital and Strategy at G7 Connect, the largest logistics technology company in China, and she has also worked with the World Bank's Global Infrastructure Facility. It's wonderful to have all of you with us. Dear audience, as you can see, this is not your standard panel. We're going to do things a little bit differently with a more intimate setting. We'll begin by discussing governance with the first two practitioners whom I introduced. And then we will bring in Ms. Sagaris and Mr. Mezghani to talk about the role of public transport in fostering equity and inclusion, and also how we change the calculus of affordability. And in our last round of discussion, we will add Ms. Ren and Mr. Sosa to talk about the financial and technological levers for transforming transport to make it not only sustainable, but also more efficient, accessible, and affordable. So that's the agenda, and we're also very eager to hear your questions, dear audience. I will open the floor in the last 20 minutes of our session. Now, it's my pleasure to invite Mayor Jung and Minister Muñoz to please join me right over here. Oh, sorry, here are you, Minister Muñoz. Right. Excellent. So sorry that the back is a bit turned to this side. I'll try to crane my neck every now and then. So both of you, of course, are committed to fostering transport infrastructure and systems that deliver all the goals mentioned in our title: social equity, access, better health and quality of life, as well, of course, as sustainability. I'd like to ask you to please share your top 3 priorities for how we do that. Your top 3 priorities when it comes to governance and policy for sustainable and resilient transport. What works and what do we need to do more of? Mayor Jung.
Such an easy question, and well, I will give my best. I have a great vision. You see, I'm elected by the people of this city to guide and direct and to design the city. And in my opinion, we can see our cities are dictated by cars in the last 100 years. Every decade, it was more and more traffic with individual car traffic. And so the vision is clear. I think my task is to give the city back to the people. That's in short, the great vision. So we have to change the space. We have to give the pedestrians, the cyclists, the urban transport system, the space enough. And for example, you have 4 routes for cars and a small little pedestrian situation and a small bike situation, and for example the tram in the middle of the road. And I think we have to change it. So the first thing is to make the space more equal to the different kinds to move in the city. That's a great communication task. It's if you have a loss of 1 parking place, you will have the resistance of the people. So, but I think you have to do it because of climate change, because of resilience, because of safety, because of the quality of life in our cities. So the first thing is to order to organize a new space to equal traffic, different traffic systems. The second thing is you have to strengthen the public transport system. And that's a very, very a great financial task to do that, because if you want to change people to go to the city, to the inner, to their place to work, it must be a very, for example, a 5-10 minute system. You don't have to look to the watch when will the tram will come. It has be a quality of safety trams. It's people have they want to see the tram in a very qualitative situation. So it must be clean, safe, and very, very short time. Third thing is, I think in many cities we can strengthen the bike lane system. We do it since 25 years to strengthen it, to have the modal split, to change it. My goal is to have 30% of all ways are going by bike. And so for example, maybe that's the main topic: public transport, bike systems, and to change the spaces for the different traffic areas.
Great, thank you very much. And by the way, everybody, 1:30 p.m., you can see for yourself, go biking with the mayor.
Please come with me.
His annual bike trip begins at 1:30. So after the summit ends, you can have a quick bite and then head off to see for yourself. Minister Muñoz, your top three.
Thank you, Melinda. I'm going to structure the question with the three levels. First is something that in Chile we are starting to do. We are a country that comes from a governance system which is very presidential and therefore very oriented towards the capital city. And now we're starting to give the regions more to say and more funding for investments on their own region decided by them. And I think that's something that it's the path to go. It's very important that decisions are closer to the territories, and we can trust the regions and each of the cities to decide how they're going to be distributing their space, how they're going to be defining their own priorities. The second level, and I think that we need to move ahead, is to recognize that the problems, it's very easy to divide it by sectors, like the transport problems, the housing problems, the infrastructure problems, the health problems, but at the end, they're one single problem. And if we divide them by that, we won't be solving the main issue, which is how do we design cities that can be healthy, that can be accessible, that can be sustainable. And very often in Chile, we see, for instance, that of course, if you're in charge of the housing ministry, the land will be cheaper, farther away from downtown, and therefore you will be solving much more effectively the housing problem, but you will be inheriting to the city a much less sustainable city because people will take longer to reach to their jobs and to where the people have to study, and therefore you'll be inheriting a city that is probably will have no choice than to adopt the car as the most effective transport system. So, and it seems to me that in many ways, what we do when we address urban problems is that we look at the problem and try to solve the city we see. And you may see that you're lacking frequency or that you're lacking speed, and you end up solving the city you see by little changes instead of trying to build the city you want to see. And to solving the city you want, or to building the city you want to see, you need to really change the way you approach the problem by addressing these sectors at the same time. It's very nice to take the tram from downtown to here and see a street that probably in my country they will see it's too narrow to fit a tram. It's too narrow to fit a tram and a bike path. Still, you see it when you take the tram from downtown to here, that they do this by giving car a very limited space. Not only a limited space that makes car less attractive, but at the same time, cars travel at a reasonable speed, which is safe for everyone. So the third issue is public transport should be the structuring mode. And you should put it first. And second, you should have great non-motorized transport. And what's left, of course, we need to have some space for cars, but we should have our priorities right. So those are my 3 points.
Great, thank you. Clearly, lots of consensus here. And in fact, there is a broader consensus in general among transport policymakers that what we do need to do less of is rely on the car. But by no means do all citizens feel that way. As you pointed out, Mayor, you talked about that parking place. One parking place alone will generate pushback. So how do you think decision makers can win support for policies that we know are the right thing to do, but that don't necessarily meet with widespread public enthusiasm?
Communication. That's one point. We have to talk with people. We have to understand their problems. If you are for example, you have a working place outside 20, 30 kilometers and there's no public transport system to come to this place. You need a car. And you have to accept that. So we have to listen to the people very clearly. What are their main problems? We have to try to find solutions. For example, a parking place for the quarter, to give the last mile for biking or something else, because the way to your home from the parking place, the ways will be longer in future. You need more time. And so we have to talk about that, and it must be attractive, the solution you will give parking place in the district, short ways to biking, or for example public transport system. You need in the price must be low. The price must be low of public transport system. That's the point. So it's a long way, and we have to. You need time. You can't do it in a hurry up way and don't accept what the fear of people is.
Let me ask you, Minister, the same question. And we talked about it a little bit yesterday in the ministerial roundtable, but I'd love to talk about it here because there are many more to participate and listen. The question is, how do we wean middle-class commuters off the car? Because transport experts and aficionados love to sing the praises of inclusion in public transport. But the fact is, many car drivers don't want inclusion. They want a private, comfortable space. There's a big inequality element here. I first became aware of this living in Houston, Texas, some time ago, where the only people who rode the bus were those who were working as gardeners and household help. It was as basic as that. And you yourself have said we have to stop thinking of bus rapid transport as something for those who can't afford anything better. How do you make that happen?
Well, I think that we need to, of course, make public transport better, which means more efficient, more affordable. And of course, that means that the urban space has to be distributed differently than what we see in many cities worldwide. We need to understand that subsidizing public transport is not wasting our money, but instead investing. It's a social investment. And of course, that means that our cities will be better if we put some of our funding there. I also think that it's good to have authorities that use public transport and can be seen in public transport. They can show that public transport is not only a very dignifying option, but at the same time convenient. And I think that, and reliable, which it usually is. There's a lot of mistrust from people using the car about the experience of using public transport. And I think that is most of the time not very effective. And even though sometimes public transport fails, I think in the long run, it's very effective. And in the long run also, it provides the satisfaction of doing the right thing for the city. And that's a message we need to move ahead. And I think authorities should be the first ones to be seen in public transport daily, and as also, if possible, using also the bike as the mayor is doing today.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a key factor, public transport system, for suburban areas to connect to the urban centers. If you don't change this system to connect the suburbans to the urban areas with public transport, we will have no chance to change the system.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's many things that we need to do that we've been discussing. We need to plan public transport as a system and not mode by mode, not service by service. We need to make it accessible. We have now applications in our phones that tell us when the bus is coming. I mean, the system has improved so much. Now we have electric buses that are softer to ride, that have very often air conditioning in many cities. So the technology is helping us. But at the end, we need to convince the car driver to leave the car at home and use the bus or the metro.
This is a great moment to bring in our next two panelists. So I will ask UITP's Mohamed Mezghani and also Lake Sagaris to please join us here. And you'll find your chairs with name tags on them somewhere over there. Yeah, perfect. So let's pick up on some of what we have been talking about, and I'll start, if I may, with Lake. And Lake, you, along with Juan Carlos, have worked at the Bus Rapid Transport Center of Excellence in Santiago, and I know that you see walk, bike, bus combinations as offering crucial options also for vulnerable groups, including women. So talk to us a little bit about why that is and how we get that integrated vision.
Well, too long we've thought that transportation is kind of a gender neutral topic, and actually it's not. So when we talk about integration of walking and cycling as crucial modes within the system that Juan Carlos is talking about, we really have to change the way we plan transport. Because BRT has been a wonderful solution in cities all around the world, but it's not winning people's hearts and minds. And it's not doing that because it's not reaching out to people. It's doing wonderful technological and infrastructure changes, but it's not reaching out enough to people. So walking and cycling are really central to this new system, to greening transportation. We haven't talked about them nearly enough this week, the way you would have thought we would have, given the topic greening transport. One subject I haven't heard at all is that when you make your transportation system more efficient by making short trips mainly by walking and intermediate trips by cycling, and then connecting those trips to your public transport system with the suburban connection that you say, then you have so much efficiency in the use of space that you can begin to re-green your city. You can begin to improve food security by having local community gardens and orchards along the sides of your streets. So this is a really different perspective, but one that for sustainability and the urgency, I mean, we're moving more and more into just facing one crisis after another. So how do we get the vision right so that we're not doing the little band-aid solutions, but we're really, with each crisis, we're pushing the whole system forward. Walking and cycling, gender, care-related trips have to be the center of public transport planning, not just something, oh yeah, we'll add that on if we have time. Oh, and we don't have time.
And that goes back to the point about we need a vision and not incrementalism to simply add this little piece and this little piece. Mohamed, let me get you to also talk about that positive vision. I want to talk about some of the other issues and the challenges that have been mentioned as well, but first I'd like to tease out the positive vision. And I know that you are absolutely deeply committed to making the so-called positive externalities, the benefits of public transport, more visible. For example, at COP28, UITP essentially started a campaign to try to encourage cities and governments to really see public transport as a key part of their NDCs. And you've said that that is absolutely overlooked by many, many actors. So perhaps talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Thank you, Melinda. Do you allow me just to give one input to the discussion you had earlier?
Of course. I want you to do that, but I don't want to go too much into financing yet.
No, not on the
Okay,
finance.
good.
It's more about the image of public transport.
Great, yes, do it.
One question was how to make public transport more attractive. And just, I'm from Tunisia. And from time to time, I have my family visiting me in Paris. And in Tunisia, they don't use public transport at all. They have cars, and they have big cars, and
Right.
But when they come to Paris, they use only public transport. And they can afford renting a car if they want, or they can afford the taxi. But they only use public transport. Why? Because it's frequent. Because it goes everywhere, because it's available, because it's reliable. And because also it's a mode for everyone. It's not only those who have no choice who are using it there. So there are 50 million tourists using public transport in Paris. So it means that if it is available, if it is frequent, if it is affordable, people will use it. And if they see that it is faster than using a car, they will use it. So I think this is very important if we want to attract people in public transport. And I think this is what you are doing here in Leipzig and in Santiago by multiplying the different options, public transport options. Now, regarding your question about the COP and about the benefits about that we try to convey the benefits of public transport, and also to try we realized that only 65% of the NDCs, of the country climate plans, only 65% of the countries, they have included transport in their NDCs. Transport. And imagine, so public transport even comes after that. And when they include transport, they include it from the technology point of view. It means that about electrification, about hydrogen buses, about so it's not at all. Modal shift is not covered. It means we know that public transport emissions represent only 2 to 3% of the whole transport emissions. So even if you electrify or convert all your buses into electric buses, into zero-emission buses, and you of course trains are already most of them are zero-emission anyway. So you will not have an impact on the climate change. So the impact can only come with modal shift, with making people move differently. Of course, walking, cycling. This is zero emissions by definition, and then public transport because. We were talking earlier about the space, how to better use the space. If we use the space based on the number of people and not based on the number of vehicles, we will emit less and we will better use our space. A bus is 100 an articulated bus is 100 people at peak hour. A car at peak hour is one person, or the average is 1.2. So you see how much space you can save, and if you have a bus stuck in traffic, it will not make it more attractive. So we need to have the bus in a dedicated lanes, or having tramways, of course, metros. This is how we can attract more people.
May I just ask you, when you talk to UITP members, do you get the feeling that their own vision is shifting toward what Lake described, or to what the mayor suggested? We have to give the city back to people, and that means these modes that really start with the feet or the cycle?
Certainly. This is not only shared by all our members, but I would like to remember 4 years ago when we had the lockdowns in our cities, and all this empty space, which are, before used by cars and we have seen at that time the essential role of public transport, the essential role of cycling. You remember the Corona lanes, we call them the Corona lanes. In 24 hours we had bike lanes in our cities, So this is, and we remember also that people, they took the streets for restaurants and for, coffee shops, etc. So, and now we kept some of this, which is very good. So, giving back cities to people, like you said, Mr. Mayor. This is of course shared. And one aspect about that is that in UITP, we have the ambition to redefine public transport, is to go beyond mass transit, because mass transit is the backbone and must remain the backbone, but we need to think door to door and not just station to station. And if we think door to door, then we'll include bike sharing, scooter sharing, ride hailing, car sharing, carpooling, etc., and try to combine all of this in the same offer to the citizens. And if they have that, they will not need to own a car or to use a car, because they can combine the different modes according to their needs.
Lake, if I can come back to you to talk a little bit also about how we generate political will on the one hand and confront backlash on the other. Backlash, of course, it's not just a citizen who's angry that his park place has disappeared. It's also lobbies, big, powerful lobbies. What works in governance to try to cope with that?
Well, that's the question of the century. And it comes at a time when most of the communication strategies for positioning behavioral change or attitudinal change have failed. So it's really crucial. So the short answer is that the participatory methods of the 20th century are not enough, that the kinds of debates and dialogues and action that has to go on requires shifting from a command and control governance approach to a collaborative, fostering action approach. So governments have to stop just asking citizens what they think, and they have to bring citizens into the real discussions about, hey, we're in trouble here. How can we do this? What are our options? Where do we go with this? Because if you look at the history of humanity, and it's a pretty complex process, we need social movements to make these kinds of changes. And the big failure to date is that we're only talking to individuals. We're not building organizations. We finance consultancies, but we don't finance citizen partners, leaders for these processes, except the United States. They do it. They've got World Resource Institute, they've got ITDP, they've got other organizations. But the rest of us in the rest of the world who are trying to do initiatives on the ground with citizens are dying of hunger, and we're not being able to keep on good professionals, and we're not being able to play our role as effectively as we should be. And that's because there's a lot of talk about investing in infrastructure, and there's no investment in socio-political infrastructure. That's citizen organizations in every language, in every culture, who are part of these debates, who can take it to their peers, and who can bring them out in low-scale, small-scale debates where you reach conclusions and then you can move ahead much more efficiently.
Can I get the two policymakers to weigh in on that point, Mayor? I recently met with civil society organizations in this city, and there's some pretty vocal ones out there.
It's absolutely correct. I think we have to support peer groups in the quarter, in some special pedestrians. We have association of cyclists. We have to involve groups in the urban traffic plans, and yeah, we support. We do, and you have to give money to honor the volunteers. You need a combination of volunteers and exactly of hauptamtliche Kräfte. I don't know the...
Yeah, those who are, paid for public service.
Paid for public,
yeah.
Yes.
Minister. Yeah, no, it's interesting that even, as I claimed before, that it's good, right, I think it's necessary to have authorities that use public transport. That doesn't make them experts on public transport service. Because as I was mentioning yesterday, you usually use public transport on one service or two out of 300 in the city, on one city out of 30 cities in the country. You only use it in one direction at certain times of the day, never with kids, never with disabilities. So it's very important, if you really want to improve public transport, is to hear what people actually need and what people are actually experiencing when they use public transport at different moments of the day in different parts of the country. So the issue of having good ways and active ways of listening to what people are experiencing when they use public transport and the opportunities to improve. If you were to hear to the users, you would see there's so many ideas right there that you could take to improve stuff that is very difficult while sitting only at the ministerial seat in Santiago in my building. So I think it's very relevant to go out there, to be an authority that is really in terrain, in the services, and at the same time having good opportunities. And I think the social networks are great places to gather some of those opportunities, or to realize that some of the service that you think is great is failing in one or two dimensions.
I want to give a concrete example. You know the super blocks in Barcelona. And the idea was, I want to have such a super block in Leipzig too. Huh? And how you can reach it, how you can do it. And so we have a small association in the quarter, and they have had the plan to do it. And we give them money, and they collect money by by national government. And so we can realize there's a great resistance against it in the quarter, but there is a struggling peer group. We support it, and so it becomes reality. So I think that's the way.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to, Mohamed, you're welcome to comment on this discussion as well, but I'd like to now take us closer to the topic of money and financing. Do you want to give a comment on this first before I pose a question?
No, I don't have anything to add, because I think we heard three perspectives which converge at the same point, and I agree with what was said.
Then I will pick up, and I think it was Minister Muñoz who said we need more subsidies for public transport. And I know that you have said elsewhere that we shouldn't even think of them as subsidies. We should think of them essentially as recognition of the benefits that public transport generates. And you've also said that it's precisely because cars seem cheaper that so many people resort to them. So how do we change this calculus of costs and benefits in the minds of those who are choosing transport?
I think Minister Muñoz said something earlier. He said we should look at public transport as an investment and not a cost. I think this is the key statement, I would say. Public transport is an investment because it comes with benefits. Benefits for the whole society, benefits for the well-being of people, for the competitiveness of the economy. Because when you invest $1 or €1 in public transport, it generates $4 to $5 of euros in the local economies. When you invest the same amount of money for road construction or for development of public transport system, you create 25% more jobs in public transport. Public transport jobs are not jobs that you can relocate somewhere else on other continents. They are local jobs, green jobs. In cities like Brussels, Vienna, or Amsterdam, public transport is the first employer. So, and we have, not to mention road safety. We have evidence that the cities who have developed public transport, they have less fatalities than cities without public transport. So there are many indicators like that showing the benefits. So these benefits, we should not assess public transport from financial perspective. We should assess from an economical perspective about because of the benefits it brings. And we should also have an approach where we make those who generate the nuisance pay for it. I mean, the space occupancy, we were talking about space occupancy. This is a resource. So those who occupy the space, cars, because they occupy more space, they have to pay for it. Those who generate the pollution or the CO2 emissions, they have to pay for it. The parking space, the same. We have many cities where parking is free. Still free. So it's not normal. So if we add all this, we will see that we are subsidizing cars much more than public transport. And for me, it's not a subsidy for public transport, it's a compensation. Because when you have an operator to whom you will impose a tariff, which is normal because we need affordable tariffs, we impose the roads, we impose the schedules, it's normal that we compensate this operator. You will never impose this kind of things to a commercial shop or to a supermarket, so that's why you don't compensate them. So for the operators, we need to compensate, to recognize this public service obligation, because that's and one last item is that we mentioned decarbonization. Decarbonization is not just about environment. It has the three pillars: the social, the economic, and the environmental pillar. And this is very important. The title of this event is Greening Transport, which is good. And I don't think in the mind of ITF, greening is only about environment. But it could be misleading to some people, thinking that the objective is just to decarbonize and it's just to make it greener, and then we have reached our objective. And so it's important to go back to the fundamentals of sustainability with the three pillars. Right. That's very important. And if we have this approach, then we can have the more arguments for the need to fund public transport.
And this is why, of course, our title is Resilient, Prosperous, and Equitable,
Excellent.
because there we have economic, environmental, and social sustainability. Let me use this opportunity to bring in our final pair of panelists. So please, Shuai Ren and Ángel Cárdenas Sosa, if you will please join us. And I'd like to now start out with, essentially bridge from the topic that we've just had and stay with investment and affordability, and start out, if I may, with you, Ángel Sosa. CAF is both a development bank and a financial institution, and I'd like to know how you address challenges to decarbonizing urban mobility as a whole, including boosting affordable, equitable urban mobility.
Thank you. So I think to answer the question, I'll probably try to structure that. We find 4 big challenges. And I think the first one, and Minister Muñoz was referring to it, when you, some of the counterparts you work with, particularly subnational governments and cities, not necessarily have the planning capacity, the technical capacity. That it's a common coin in Latin America. And the second one that you also find is that, and it's actually probably promoted because of the lack of planning and technical capacity, you don't find projects. I mean, there's a big discussion about, lack of money. But to be honest, you only have ideas that are not necessarily translating into feasible and economic viable projects. And it's not necessarily that you don't have the funding, it's that you might not have a project to work with. But then if you overcome those two, the third one is that some of these counterparts have missed 2 major components. One is the fiscal capacity, not necessarily the public finances are in order. So they, even if they have the projects and technical capacity, not necessarily are able to tap into the markets and to get funding. And that actually leads to another problem. Not necessarily there are asset classes in place in Latin America to finance this. So there is a lack of financial innovation. And an additional one, and going back to what this plenary is about, more equitable and prosperous and resilient cities, I think in Latin America, we still lack the 21st century vision of the sectors or the planning. I mean, we're still planning, and Lake was just saying it, I mean, gender neutral. And by the way, like, I wanted to congratulate you and thank you publicly because you've been a lot of help with our studies in gender in the last 10 years. I mean, we're planning systems basically through lenses of the 80s or the 90s, where, I mean, there wasn't any major gender analysis or assessment. And when you look into the data, you see that 7 out of 10 women in Latin America have been victims of sexual harassment in public transport. So you want women, you want people to use the public system, but you do not acknowledge that there are barriers there. So with those 4 challenges, and to answer your question, how do we address? The first one, we have developed, first we start the dialogue, the public policy dialogue, and hopefully bring the best expertise there is around and made it available to the cities or the national governments, and hopefully work collaboratively, jointly, not necessarily prescribing, because that's probably one of the key challenges for us as a multi-NDVs, not to prescribe formulas that are imported from overseas, right, but to work jointly with the local governments or national governments. But second, we have developed a set of instruments or tools in terms of technical non-reimbursables assistance, either pre-investment facilities or facilities that are designed to strengthen local capacities. And in that, we have around $10 million annually for those facilities, one for subnationals, other for genders, and other for transportation as well. And the last 2, fiscal and financial, we, and you mentioned, we are not only a development bank, we're also a financial institution. We're a bank. We need to make money. That's something we set out in the open. And, but we could lend in 2 separate windows, the sovereign lending and the non-sovereign lending. And one of the key challenges as well is that how you become a market maker in Latin America to develop that asset class. And we've been exploring with subnational governments and state-owned enterprises funding non-sovereign lending, improving the terms, conditions, the tenors, the grace periods, but more importantly, to have the blended finance, to tap into all the opportunities. I mean, we're looking across the world how greening infrastructure is attracting more and more capital that would actually be aligned and more patient to develop this type of infrastructures. So we try to be the catalyst for that, but we also see that there's no much room in the public area, in the sovereign window, but in the non-sovereign. To make that transition, to go directly to cities, to subnational governments, to state-owned enterprises, and provide financing in private terms, but with the blended finance and the technical cooperation has proven to be very successful and has allowed us to overcome that challenge. And the last one, and I briefly touched when I thank Lake, we've been working for the last 10 years in gender and mobility. And we have launched, and again, Lake was the pioneer and helped us out, set the precedent in Chile, in Santiago de Chile, with the study, Ella se mueve segura, she moves safely. And basically that was a baseline study to understand what the major challenges were for women to use the public transportation. That has been replicated and has scaled up in a way that, I mean, we're seeing in all the different cities in Latin America, but more importantly, has opened the door to do more. I mean, there's still a lot of room to do more and more, but I mean, it has put on the agenda the issue that wasn't before.
Shuai, we're going to come to tech in a moment, but I'd like to stay right now with the topic of investment. I saw you nod emphatically as Angel was talking about bankable projects. And perhaps you could put on your former World Bank infrastructure facility hat and tell us why you nodded.
Yeah, I actually agree with Andrew on that point of bankable projects. When I worked with the World Bank Global Infrastructure Facility, our objective is to channelize private financing into infrastructure development. And I heard the terms of like asset class, bankable projects, as always, like in the past 5 years. And when I started to work with the private sector, actually I find the other side is actually there are a lot of projects on the ground, startups, tech companies, when they started to have initial ideas of social entrepreneurship. And normally they won't be accessible to the funding. Normally what is funded, the funding resource for them coming from like private equities, coming from venture capitals, and that come with equity and return incentives. And that actually push these startups somehow away from social entrepreneurship, but first to survive, to make it possible to be profitable and then to expand. And that is what I observed in the past few years when I work with the private sector. And I believe that there is a bridge between public and private sector in financing for the common goods, especially for transport. And when we have our ideas of working, let's say, in logistics, my company now, basically we established the digital infrastructure for logistics companies in China. We started with our own technology, with our fundings from private equities, but not fundings from government. But when we get into the stage of scale, for now we are connected to about 2.6 million heavy-duty trucks in China. That's about 30% of the total volume of heavy-duty trucks. And we serve about more than 30,000 customers, mainly SMEs, who actually doing the fleet management services on the ground every day. And at this moment, we know that it cannot be a private company's responsibility to sustain the infrastructure. And because we grow together with the policy frameworks, normally the technology, the innovators, they goes first, and then we accumulate, we accumulate data, we accumulate the algorithms, and we can share that together with the government, universities, and institutes to make sure that this kind of digital infrastructure, though it was not like invested first by the public investment or government. But in the future, when we run these systems, it could be collaborated with governmental regulatory frameworks as well as other parties around.
Thank you very much. I want to pick up on tech in a moment, but just one quick round of responses on the financing side, if I may. So, Lake, do you have thoughts? I noticed you again nodding when Shuai was talking about some of the disadvantages faced by social entrepreneurs, and certainly that includes women entrepreneurs. I've just done a big panel for the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development on disadvantageous financing terms that really prevent women who are innovators in the energy space, renewable energy space, from getting the funding that they need. And I'm sure the same pertains to transport.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways of answering that, but I would say one of the most direct is we're inventing something new here, and we talk a lot about innovation, and then there's the assumption that innovation is technology. And so immediately we're wasting all this ability and the creativity. For example, cycle taxis to make women's travel with children from subway entrances or bus stops much easier. It's a half kilometer, maybe less than a kilometer. But my gosh, they can't do it walking with all the stuff they're carrying and so on. They're really interesting pilot experiences in some of the Indian cities where they had, cycle rickshaws and they had them connected with technology and so on. I haven't seen that scaling up. Well, geez, guys, that solves the first and last mile problem for one hell of an important part of the population. So where is it? And by the time you get to the terms of reference and so on, those kinds of initiatives is, oh, no, we don't do bicycles, we do buses, or we do concessions, and we'll subsidize highways, but not buses, etc. So that's a really key issue. But the other thing is that within this financing, there has to be funding for civil society organizations. What do bus companies and bus operators and train operators do today? They hire a PR company, they send out a campaign, very few people listen to it, very few people's personal behavior is affected by it, and what they should be doing is within that, they should be funding civil society organizations to lead behavioral change campaigns, because that makes it a peer-to-peer experience rather than authority telling you what to do, which any self-respecting human being resists.
Thank you very much. Let me ask the two policymakers if they'd like to respond to that. And if you would, Mayor Jung, perhaps tell us a little bit about the collaborative model that's in place for financing urban mobility here in a city like Leipzig, because you've got a three-part system. You've got the federal authorities, you've got the state authorities, and the local authorities all involved. That may have some benefits. It definitely also has some challenges, right?
It sounds complicated, huh? Yeah, but the system is not so bad. You see, we say in Germany, eine geteilte Verantwortung. It's a
shared responsibility.
Shared responsibility, because the national government is giving money to the Länder,
to the states,
the German states. We call it Regionalisierungsmittel, also
regionalization resources. And they have to give it to the regions and to the cities. And in the city, we have our own system. We have, for example, in Leipzig, I have a company structure with the winning money of the energy company. I finance the public traffic company. And in this together from national state, regionals, and a local company, we can work, but we need. I think we need a change system and a change tax system, a CO2 tax system to finance
the change of the mobility system because it's not enough money in the system now to change it. You can work in the same way as the last 20, 30 years, but you can't give a push. So I think we have to change the whole tax system to make an invest in public infrastructure.
Minister Muñoz, yesterday in our ministerial roundtable, somebody said, actually, public transport simply ought to be free. The fact is there are cities and regions where it is free, many of them in North America and Europe, but not only, in Latin America as well. Is that a viable model for less wealthy countries?
Well, the issue of free fare is something that is, I think, currently being discussed. What we agree already, I think, is that public transport should have subsidies, that cities need public transport systems that are better than what you would have if they were to be funded only by fares. If the only funding you have is fares, the public transport system you would have is a lousy system that nobody would ever choose if they have a choice. So I think it's clear that we need to have something much better than that, because it's only in that case that cities will work and will be sustainable. And that's why we're working now very hard in Santiago to have a subsidy law that will guarantee that the subsidies will be there in the long term. Mm-hmm. Because also sometimes we don't have this this guarantee that the funds will be there so that you can plan for long-term services. Important here also is that we need to provide infrastructure that does not lay on a private provider. Very often you have a private provider of public transport that eventually fails, and if you realize that as authority that if you want to replace this provider, the provider will go out with the buses, with the terminals, and that's all. Of course, you end up captive, and you cannot really replace them. So it's very important that the authority has those strategic elements of the public transport system so that you can really replace a public transport provider that is not providing the service you want. Another thing that I think is very relevant is that we need to understand public transport involving bike sharing systems. At least my personal experience is that I turned into a biker by, at the beginning, being part of these bike sharing systems that would let me go from the public transport to the final destination very easily. And then I realized that I could take the bike from home. But I think it's very interesting to understand the sustainable transport system we need to build as such. Mm-hmm. And the funding should consider all of the elements, including the bike sharing system, which I think provide really good complement to public transport when they don't really reach the capillarity that we would love.
Mohamed, you had a comment.
Next time, take your bike in the metro. No, I wanted to say, because there are many elements that were mentioned, and maybe I will start with the funding aspect, because there is there are many people or many stakeholders that are benefiting from public transport, so they need to contribute to it, to its funding. I mean, when you are a real estate developer or a land developer, and you know the value of your land is doubled because you have a connection with public transport, this developer must contribute to the funding of public transport. When you are a shopping mall, you know, where people can go there by public transport, the shopping mall must contribute to public transport. Regarding free public transport, I think this is an important issue. Depends what are the objectives, because when you ask car drivers why they don't use public transport, they will never tell you because they have to pay. They will tell you because it's not available enough, it's not safe, it's dirty. I mean, many aspects, but they will never tell you no because I have to pay. Anyway, their car costs much more than using car costs much more than using public transport. So if the objective is modal shift, then free public transport is the wrong answer. It's not by providing public transport for free that people will go and use it. And we had the experience with the €9 ticket. I mean, in Germany last summer, which was €9 per month, you can use all modes of public transport, regional public transport. And we saw that those coming from the car are very, very low portion only. So this is, sorry? 8% only coming. What it generated, only people using more public transport, but not new customers for public transport. So what's important is to have affordability, is to ensure the affordability. It means that those who are in need, they get the subsidy, really. Here we can talk about subsidy. We help them access public transport and take public transport. So that's the most, and also having simple fares. Something that we don't, you don't have to think about which fare I have to take. So I just use public transport and easily, because I can easily see what's the fare. It could be a fixed fare. It could be something, for example, now what is developing much is that you access public transport with your bank card, for those who have a bank card, of course. Mm-hmm. You pay directly, and you know that at the end of the day there is a capping. You will not pay more than a daily pass. So that's the kind of, especially for the occasional users, and the car drivers are occasional users, could be occasional users, so that we offer them an easy access to public transport in a way that they don't think anymore how much they have to pay, or where to pay, or how to buy a ticket. And we all experienced this kind of situations when we arrive in a city for the first time. So that's important.
May I comment on that?
Super short, if you would, because I want to come back to Shuai.
Very short. We have developed in Santiago a system where if you pay with the phone, there's a maximum amount you will pay by the month, and has been really, really welcomed by people. They know that as long as they reach a certain amount of trips per month, everything else will be free. So if you know that you're a frequent user and you know that we'll reach that level, any extra trip you make will have no cost for you, because you will reach the cap earlier in the month. So that has been proven quite successful.
Thank you very much. So let me come back to our two new panelists and ask you to talk a little bit about tech. And Shuai, you mentioned it in the context of your last remark, but you're also working now with a lot of focus on road freight and trying to make that greener, more efficient, decarbonize it. So tell us about that effort and where you see particular promise in digital technologies.
Yes, for logistics, as I'm maybe the only speaker in this panel coming from the freight sector, for logistics, in China, I think in many countries, the industry is very fragmented. And about 90% of our customers are private companies, SMEs, and it is really hard for them to actively embrace decarbonizing concept, because they run their daily operations and run their business that takes all their time. And what we've seen is that I heard this upstream and downstream end-to-end solutions several times in our discussion in the conference. And logistics company and the industry is that industry. Every single request coming from the shipper. And from our customers, they need to listen to their shippers, what their requirements on, let's say, data connectivity, on emission reduction. And if they have that requirement, basically the carriers, if I want to have the business with the shipper, I need to comply with that requirement. So that is the first, the background that's in our industry. And what technology company can do is first to establish this decarbonizing framework together with the shippers, larger shippers. They have their goals of decarbonizing, and for their downstream part of the decarbonization, what are their KPIs and how they collect data, and what are the requirements they give to each of their carriers, and did they perform well towards that target. And we have this all kind of data collections that can report the carbon emission and help the whole system run. And secondly, what is quite interesting and new in China is that the battery EV transitions, especially for heavy-duty trucks. Heavy-duty trucks is the most challenging part for decarbonizing transport, decarbonizing freight, because it's long haul, and the energy efficiency of using diesel is still like cost-effective than other kind of resources. And what we're doing is that we actually help the early movers who are already buying new EVs. Some of them, they were like in like urban delivery because they need to buy new EVs. Some of them are in like raw material, steel, power plants, all these kind of sectors, and they're required to buy new EVs. However, it's not possible for them to run the EV trucks the way they run in the past to make it commercial viable. And the reason is that new EVs, they are born, need to be connected to other kind of data, including battery data, charging stations or battery swapping stations, and the routing, and as well as like the electricity prices. That all of these elements affects the commercial viability of using EV trucks. And what we do is that we provide the basic data connectivity to our customers who buy the vehicles and want to make profits out of the vehicles. And in that case, they can make money out of using EV rather than using diesel trucks. And a third part is that our daily operation is to improve efficiency of operations. Since we have data, the fleet management is more streamlined since all the data are seen and can be managed based on the evidences. And in that, we can reduce the fuel consumption for those diesel trucks still on the road. And just give you a number that in the past year, 2022, in total, we actually support our customers to reduce about 1.5 million tons of CO2 emissions just to reduce their fuel consumption on the ground.
Let me ask Ángel to talk a little bit about how CAF sees digital solutions, both in terms of boosting efficiency of transport, but also boosting equity and inclusion. Is that playing a role in some of the projects to which you're lending?
Yeah, and I would probably start off by saying that we might have like two different business lines to approach that. The first one would be we do patient capital, we do impact investment, we call our direction, and some of the most important projects that we've been seeing internally in our credit committees are startups that are actually targeting to that, to data management, to understand, and perhaps Mr. Muñoz was saying it before, that we shouldn't be looking at this through like silos or sectoral lenses, that you need to see this more in an integrated approach from like the territory, he said, or the urban development approach. So you see companies that are basically using the power of data, could help to make all the sectors more efficient and all the investments. And we're seeing this more and more. And I would say that what we're seeing in our committees are energy and city or urban development companies that are using data to help governments, local governments, to address their issues. So we finance those. We provide patient capital or venture capital to hopefully until we could exit and they would be scalable. The second one is financing directly to huge projects. And in all these projects, whether it's a metro or a BRT system, you would see more and more adoption of technology and how is targeted or designed to improve efficiency, to boost efficiency, not only for the system per se, but as you all mentioned before, to provide a better quality service to the customer, to bring the system closer to the customer and hopefully provide a better solution. So you would see that more and more. So it's something that we definitely, want to work with. We have a special division at the bank that has digital transformation, and that does a cross-cutting job, sectoral, and helps all the different units. But what you would see, particularly in the transport system, is that, I mean, more and more, either it's a city level or subnational level or even national level, embracing technology as a solution, not only to make it more efficient from the logistic and financial perspective, but to bring it closer to the customer and to provide a better quality service.
Very quick follow-up question, if I may, before we open to audience questions. But you mentioned it in your first answer that there is no one-size-fits-all. You're working with a very diverse range of countries, regions, cities. Nonetheless, we heard in the open ministerial how much many countries welcome exchange of best practices. And clearly that is something that CAF can do. Can you just give an example or two of how you find the right balance between local solutions for local challenges and needs, and at the same time bringing in experience and knowledge from other regions?
I think the principles are what you should be looking at. I mean, the principles of efficiency, of quality service should be there. How you translate that, or how you transfer those to different regions or more different markets, to so to speak, it's the big challenge there. Because, I mean, if you are I live in Bogota. Bogota is a large city that has an amazing transport team that does provide amazing solutions. You cannot compare that to a mid-sized city in Latin America. But the principles that are in Bogota could be transferable to other mid-sized cities. So the big challenge there, and I think that's what, and I'm sorry, I'm going to sound a little bit arrogant here, that's what we're good at the bank. It's how you translate that from that public policy discussion and cater to the local government jointly, not prescribing, and I insist on this, because, I mean, multilaterals have this kind of aura that we come in with the solutions already packaged. No, we sit down and we work together with either the mayor or the governor and see, these are the best practices that are around. I'm not saying you should use them all, but it's worth to look into it, and if it works for you, we can probably work together. And that's where the one-size-doesn't-fit-all part comes into place. And a good example of that, it's that, I mean, we could work in the metro of Bogota. We're working in that transaction, but we could go to Arequipa and work in a small-scale BRT. But the principles in Bogota and Arequipa are the same, to provide quality service to customers and to make it as efficient as possible and to make it as green as possible.
Thank you very much. Let us now, without further ado, take some questions from the audience. And we have microphones in the room. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and we will come to you with the mic. So I see several over here in this clearly very active block. Do you see can you raise your hands again so they find you? Here's one in the front row, blue shirt. And we're going to bundle the questions, cluster them. So do tell us who you are, and if you can keep your question concise, that would be great.
Okay, my name is Salvador Saavedra. I come from a city that in the 1970s decided to create municipalities to sleep on. So now you can imagine the big problem we have. And because municipalities, and we have lots of people that are the owners of their own municipalities, so that they do not share responsibilities. So how do you plan a change in a city that has been developed for 100 years in a way, that needs a long-term plan? What's the long-term plan so that they can imagine how to resolve the city problems on a long term, and in how long can they be resolved?
Great, thank you. We're going to get a couple more and then get some answers.
The city is Mexico City.
Okay.
And it's metropolitan area.
Yeah, that's a big challenge. Next, who else in that block had a question? So in the second row, the lady in the flowered shirt.
Thank you. Thank you for the wonderful panel. My name is Marina Lucic. I work in Amazon in the Operations Sustainability team. And my question to all the panelists was, you know, we have to serve our customers. We're a large retailer and logistics operator. Many of our customers live in cities. We know global population is increasingly moving to cities. So how do the panelists see this interaction between a livable, safe, walkable, cyclable city and the need to deliver physical goods to customers, so to small businesses, to customer homes. How do they see that interaction? And we use things like micromobility. We have 40 cities with micromobility in Europe, some in the US, and starting to expand globally. So how do you see those solutions playing out in a city that is both economically and commercially viable, but as well very livable? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me take one more in that block. So who else had one? There, third row, right behind the lady who just spoke. Thanks.
Yeah, hello, Arne Betzner, University of St. Gallen, Switzerland. Thank you very much for this debate. I think one of the key moments that we had there was when you talked about the necessity to bring middle classes back into public transportation. And in my country, it's the case that we have CEOs and directors of multinational companies that ride a commuter train to work daily, despite having a chauffeured limousine on call. Now, why is that? The reason there is because it's reliable, it's affordable, and it's made socially desirable in the perfection. It's because it's part of the strategy for securing the future of our country. Now, the question here is, how do we deal with negative externalities that are societal externalities that are not mobility inherent? Like, for example, I had a couple of mandates in the US recently. In San Francisco, the homelessness situation got completely out of control. In other US cities, it's the same thing. I was assaulted at knife point 2 years ago on a Seattle light rail. So how do we deal with that, which is a very, very sensitive topic? Of course, it's not the problem of the homeless people. We all know that in the US, you can have a solid middle-class career and find yourself on the street within 4 months if a couple of things go wrong. So how do we deal with that without getting into the wrong political corner? And how do we deal in the mobility field with these externalities that we need to address, or we will lose large parts of the society? Inclusion goes both ways. It goes towards the unbankable, but it also goes to those in a $2,000 suit. And you need to make the mobility, the alternative mobility systems, the non-car mobility desirable in order for it to work out in the way we all hope that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me ask, let's not everybody address every question, or we definitely won't be able to take any more. So I'm going to just ask those who wish to speak to a question to let me know. So the first one, Mexico City. What do we do with a city that has grown in the way that Mexico City has grown, that has a very long history and in many ways is, difficult to work with? Minister Muñoz?
I think it's a very difficult question. I think that, I was hiding, but I was... No, I think, it's... We already have cities that are, I think, too wide. I mean, they're not dense enough. The distance are too long. And I think there are cities that are very hard to solve. It seems to me that a very important issue here is how can we provide job opportunities, educational opportunities, commerce everywhere in the city, so that no matter where you live in a long city, you still have opportunities nearby, so that those that have to make a long trip are not the norm, but an exception. I think that we need to work on density. It was really nice to, again, in the trip from downtown to here, to see that in Leipzig, you have all over, if you notice, like a very reasonable density of buildings of 4, 5 floors, which makes probably a very effective city in terms of the distance you need to travel to reach anywhere here. If I were to compare to my city, probably in a trip like this one, you would see a much lower density that you see here. So the issue on how do we grow as a city in terms of probably growing inside other than growing, extending the city where, of course, land is cheaper, but it's cheaper to buy, but it's much more expensive to operate or to use. It's very interesting when you land in a European city, you very often see very clear borders on the city, while in a South American city, you see a much more dispersed, showing that the cities are growing in a way that I think it's worse for everyone. So the Mexico City question is very difficult. It's very, very long. So my question would be, maybe we need to bring some of the attractions of the city towards those dormitory areas so that people can find most of their needs nearby. I think that we need to work on making our city more dense, more compact, and avoid the extension that we see almost everywhere.
I'm going to go across the panel, speak basically to whichever aspects you would like to speak to, Lake. So perhaps you have thoughts on Mexico City as well, but otherwise the other two, Amazon and middle class.
I do have thoughts there, but I'm going to go for the other two questions, the one about crime and the one about Amazon, because I think they're really, really related. There's nothing worse for our societies than growing inequality. And let me say, we have one of the most unequal countries in the world, and the high costs of that in Chile or in Brazil or elsewhere are huge. So what kinds of things? There's all kinds of new entrepreneurs coming up in cycling and cycle cargo, the delivery system, obviously the Uber-style systems, which create really poor living conditions and working conditions. You know, my neighborhood is full of delivery folks on bicycles, but some of them are diesel-operated bicycles. There's a small program to substitute those bicycles for electro-assisted and so on. But that's a huge area of a sustainable economy that needs to be built. And the small entrepreneurs can't build it on their own. They need a systemic assistance. None of them are all brilliant and ready to roll, but they all have a lot of knowledge that if they were given half a chance, would really move them ahead. And why is that important in terms of crime and so on? Well, if you think crime's a problem in San Francisco, try some of the poblaciones or the favelas in Latin America. And that's lack of work, and that's lack of dignified access to work, to education, to a more formal economy and so on. And we need to be investing in these people. They have as many or more capacities as any of us here in this room, and I think we're a pretty extraordinary group. And they're not getting any investment in their development. So within that as well, taking a gender approach, women working on cycle deliveries, all over the city. All of a sudden, you create a safe network of people moving around the city. They're a reference point. We've taken women cargo delivery people into schools as part of our Cool Routes to School program. The kids love it. It completely changes their ideas about social roles, but it also changes the levels of aggression that they feel are necessary to survive in the city. They start to see that there are more conciliatory forms of moving through the city, and that reduces incivilities, crime, and violence.
Thank you. Ángel, whichever aspects you wish.
Yeah, just going to touch up. I'm definitely avoiding the Mexican one. It's just tough. Sorry. Going to the logistic one and building into what Lake just said, there are experiences already happening about like, putting this on the agenda for the planning of the cities, and B, how you could incorporate different actors. It's key to have the private sector, the public sector, and civil society to design that city from the urban logistic perspective. And I'm going to connect with what Lake just said about providing employment opportunities. The big challenge, and I couldn't agree more with you. If you think about San Francisco, go to my hometown, Caracas, or Quito, or anywhere else. I mean, that's just a different game. I know. It is providing employment opportunities, but employment opportunities thought differently. I mean, I think we have to look into trade schools, I mean, and just including all these populations that are felt that are left behind, that are not necessarily going to get access to any university education, but they need to be connected to the system and feel that they are part of the system. Because if you don't do that, I mean, it doesn't matter how good your transportation system. I mean, if you put lights around all your subways or BRT stations, 20 or 50 meters away, you're going to have not only homeless, but you're going to probably have a high rate of crime. So you need to include that people, and the key is employment. But employment thought in the 21st century.
In other words, a 15-minute city should also have 15-minute jobs, really. Shuai.
I'm going to respond to the Amazon question. I agree that planning is definitely the most important thing if we don't plan the city right, there will be safety issues happening on the street. But at this moment, given the infrastructure is not easy to be changed, I think there are technical solutions. For example, Amazon, and what we can also do is to invest in more research and development resources on capturing the risks of road safety on the street and to predict the risks in real time. That is possible. And if that is already a module that can be provided to the delivery people, actually they can reroute, or they can plan their trips more towards a more safe way, or more, not more faster, but safer.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Thank you. Mohamed.
Thank you. Maybe the question about security and the example of Switzerland, because, you know, we in public transport, we used to say that Switzerland is the holy land of public transport. So if they start having this kind of problems, means something is going wrong in the Kingdom of Denmark. So we, I think we should consider this as it cannot be solved exclusively by public transport stakeholders. This is a societal issue. So we need coordination between the different parties and between I mean, those in charge of security, those in charge of education. I mean, it's not a transport. It's not a transport issue. It is taking place in the transport perimeter, but it's not a transport issue. So that's a societal issue, and we need to really take it seriously, because it is, as I said, if it is now taking place in Switzerland, it's really a problem for everyone.
Let me ask the mayor to weigh in, Minister, and then I'll come back, but it's going to have to be super short because they're giving me lots of signs about time being up. Mayor.
I have nothing to add.
Oh, wow.
Because Switzerland is, for me, it's Holy Land. It's a good...
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, you can...
Such tributes to Switzerland.
You don't want to hear it, but...
Wow.
Because you reach every small village, every farm by bus. And very exactly just in time. It's ein großes Vorbild.
Thank you. A good model.
No,
Minister.
I agree with Mohamed that this is a society problem, but there's something also that is profoundly wrong on how we approach public transport as travelers. We use the word user. And the user is totally detached from the service that's being provided. We should be owners. So yeah, so that we request. I mean, I like owners. Like, this is my bus, this is my train, this is my bus stop. I don't accept anyone to destroy my system. The service that will be serving my parents, that will be serving my neighbors, that will be serving my kids, that will be serving me. So I think we need to approach public transport differently, so that everyone feels that this is their own. And it's not something that you're detached from, that if it's destroyed or damaged, it's somebody else's problems.
Let me say one sentence. I think that's very, very important, because my public transport system, it's a company of the city. So our message is, it's your company. It's your bus. It's your tram. Yeah. And I think it's really, really important to do this in your consciousness.
Thank you so much. Those are wonderful last words. And I know that some of us have to go and get on your Leipzig public transport system very soon. So I will now, unfortunately, close this panel. I wish we'd have more time for audience questions. I'm making a mental note that next time we will expand that segment. But I thank you very much to all in the audience for your attention and your contributions. And let's give a warm round of applause to this fantastic panel. Thank you so much. Thank you. And dear panelists, you may return to your seats, because I am now going to hand over to Young Tae for closing words for the ITF Summit 2024. Young Tae, are you still with us somewhere? There you are. Please join me. Hello, good morning. I mean, not morning, good afternoon.
Okay.
And over to you.
So, dear friends, I know that you don't want to leave, you don't want to go home, and you don't want to graduate, you don't want to stop here. But here we are again, and at the end of 3 intensive days, and 3 rewarding days, and 3 truly inspirational days. I hope that you all had a good time.
That means yes.
Thank you very much. And also, personally, I learned a lot. And I also met very many interesting people. And this is what the summit is all about. And over 1,200 of you joined us here in Leipzig. That's a lot of handshakes. And my only regret is that I didn't have a chance to attend more sessions and meet more of you. However, I spoke with many of our member country ministers, including representatives of our newest members. And I will continue to work tirelessly for our members. But now it's almost time for us to take a break. I know what you did last night. Some of you look very tired. The well-deserved break before getting on with the job. A job of global dialogue for better transport. It is very hard for me to put into words my impressions of this year's summit. New and familiar faces, and incredible insights from experts from around the world. And amazing examples of truly innovative projects. And inspiring stories of collaboration, cooperation, and learning. Last year, in my closing remarks, I described the summit as a kaleidoscope full of colorful, beautiful pieces. I like that image. But this year, I'm also imagining other way to describe our most important gathering. In my opening remarks 2 days ago, I spoke about planting seeds. Every flourishing garden starts with the planting of one seed. So maybe this summit is like a beautiful garden, and a garden that will go on growing even after we have left, and a garden that will change colors with the seasons. But as every gardener knows, we need to keep caring for this garden we have created together, every day, every week, and every month. And our fruitful exchanges must not wither. I know that many of you will leave the summit this afternoon with new ideas and insights. And let's keep nurturing those ideas together. Who knows what wonderful flowers will bloom next spring when we gather here again in Leipzig. And this year's summit has also been about practical matters. We are an international organization after all. But just like a garden, our organization is also growing. Yesterday, the Council of Ministers of Transport voted positively for the accession of Dominican Republic, Oman, and Saudi Arabia to the ITF. The ITF now has 69 member countries. When I became Secretary General in 2017, we were 59. Last year, Brazil and Costa Rica became ITF's newest members from Latin America and the Caribbean. This year, Dominican Republic joins them. We also welcome 2 new members from the Middle East, Oman and Saudi Arabia. So step by step, ITF is becoming more global. That means Leipzig is becoming more global. The 4 ministerial roundtables we held were also highlights for me. They covered big topics: transport and climate change, supply chain resilience, inclusive transport, and support reconstructing Ukraine. I'm proud that we can offer ministers opportunities to talk frankly about complex issues with their peers. It's part of what makes the ITF unique. The end of the summit is always the moment to get a little bit nostalgic. and the moment to give thanks. And above all, I would like to thank the ITF member countries and their highest representatives assembled in the Council of Ministers of Transport. And ITF is a member-driven organization. This is what its member countries want it to be and make it to be. Sometimes the conversations we have together are hard, but we continue to grow and evolve. Even if we disagree, we find compromises and continue looking forwards. I want to salute one of our countries in particular, our 2024 presidency. Lithuania has offered tremendous support and guided us through another challenging year. Minister Skodis, your energy and commitment are an inspiration to us in the Secretariat and to our member countries. And you have worked tirelessly to improve our organization's functions and put us in an even stronger position for the future. Thank you, Lithuania. Thank you, Minister Marius Skodis. We welcome Chile as the new ITF presidency for 24-25. It's so exciting for the ITF to welcome our first presidency country in Latin America and the Caribbean since we had Mexican presidency in 2017. On an organizational level, it's also wonderful to know that we now count 7 countries from the region as members, among 69. Let me say a few words about our summit sponsors. We value them as true enablers of what we do. In Saxony, our regional partners is an unwavering supporters, and my thanks go to Minister Dulik for that. An enormous thanks goes also to the International Road Transport Union, our diamond sponsor. We truly appreciate your support. And Autocrypt from my home country, Korea, is back once again as gold sponsor. Thank you for your fidelity. Last but not least, let me gratefully acknowledge our mobility partner, Nextbike by Tier. Should you be heading for a tour with Mayor Jung after this plenary, you will ride one of their bicycles. And Lord Mayor, you and your city have always been the most generous and friendly host for the ITF. I appreciate that. So many to thank and so little time. Let me summarily pay homage to all the partners who have enriched the summit over these 3 days. Whether you contributed as an exhibitor with a panel, a side event, a report launch, a networking event, a technical tour, an outdoor demonstration, or any of the many other formats here, your presence and your creativity have enriched our ITF Summit Garden in so many ways. I must also mention the team of Congress Center Leipzig, our logistical backbone. And our friends at Compact Team have once more provided ample proof of their aesthetic sense and their project management prowess. We thank our moderators who are not only impeccable on stage, but also in their preparation.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then there is my own team, ITF Secretariat, and Mary and her team, and Research Center staff, and admin support staff. Without your tireless work, the summit would not be the success as it is today. Now please mark your diaries for next year's ITF Summit. We will meet again here in Leipzig from 21st to 23rd May 2025. It's time to say goodbye. Don't cry. Thank you for coming and have a safe journey home. And what will our garden look like next year? Where to echo my remarks at the opening of the summit? Let's find out that together. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Young Tae. Thank you for that very poetic closing. And with that, the summit comes to an end, but not the ITF community, clearly. And the community can get on those bikes 1 hour from now, actually less. So enjoy yourselves. Thanks for being with us. Bye-bye.